Welcome. We're going to get started. We have a pretty packed agenda. So I'm going to welcome everyone to One-on-One with H1. We're excited you're here to learn about our best conference planning tips from some of our pros. On this call today, we have Chris Medeiros. She's Director of Strategic Insights for H1, and Chris Riley. He is Senior Manager of Strategic Insights at H1. This is our own industry webinar series. It is being recorded. We do ask if you have questions to please type them in the chat, as we have muted participants upon entering the meeting. The recording will be available after this meeting, and we're happy to share it. So I'm going to kick it off first to Chris Riley to tell us a little bit about H1.
Hello, everybody. Great to meet everyone here online at One-on-One with H1. I want to briefly introduce myself as a Senior Manager of Strategic Insights here at our company. Very excited to give you a quick introduction into what H1 is, why it's important for your work, and how you can leverage it here to really gain insight into conference planning, as we are focused on that today. So just briefly, H1 is an application built to surface the data behind our HCP database, which includes everything from their publications to their treatment leadership status, those people who we have our information of in the US, as well as abroad, being able to surface everything about HCPs that you need to know in order to make sure that you can get all of the information for your particular company and drug, to make sure you're rolling out to your stakeholders the best information that you can possibly surface. So with that, I'll pass that over to Chris Medeiros, our Director of Strategic Solutions here at H1.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today. And thanks, Chris, for the handoff. So I'll just give you a brief intro to this, the strategy and insights team after Chris has kind of told you a little bit about what H1 is and what we do. Chris and I are part of a very small team here at H1 that is leveraged when our clients really need bespoke analyses done or consultation on anything that's related to strategic engagement with scientific experts. And both of us and all the people on our team come to this role here at H1 with pretty extensive industry experience. So for my part, I spent a little over 20 years in industry and spent the better part of the last 10 leading global strategic engagement. So I like to think that many of us on this team have really sat in the seats or adjacent to the seats that you're in, and we've been in that position of needing to get the right experts in the right chairs for various Congress engagements around the globe. So been there many times, so I feel your pain. We're right in the thick of Congress season right now, so we're starting to get into it, and I'm certain that most of you that are on the line here have some upcoming Congresses that you're thinking about, and so we'd like to kind of put the content that we're going to present to you today within the context of leveraging H1 as a tool to really optimize your Congress planning activities. So I guess from there, why don't we get on into it, Elizabeth? Let's go maybe to the next slide, and we'll have Chris kind of talk to you a little bit about what we're going to suggest.
Thanks, Chris. This is great. So this is just a quick screenshot of what we actually have in our application that services that database, that wealth of information for the HCPs that you're interested in. So when we're thinking about Congress planning, one of the really interesting thing and awesome things we can do with our platform is actually go in and surface those people who are of interest to you, understand what they have done, their research history, as well as their treatment leadership history, to really make sure that you're engaging with that stakeholder that you're going to be able to leverage for the right interaction. What's been really exciting is one of these features that we have in our platform that you might not be necessarily familiar with is a way to aggregate experts. And this is what we call tagging. This is one way that you can actually go into our platform and select those experts of interest to you and to your company to make sure that you have visibility within our platform to everybody that is on your team. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris and she can tell us exactly how you can leverage this with H1.
That sounds great, Chris. So I'll ask people to put in the chat, maybe give us a little bit of context for some of the upcoming congresses that you're planning to attend. And we promised some pearls in this presentation. So when I think about my best case scenario for planning for congresses, first of all, the earlier the better, right? Especially if you're thinking about a global congress. I used to like to really get going on the planning for this about 3 months in advance. And so an important piece to kind of kick you off is really thinking about the nominations. Now, every company is going to have a different approach that they like to take. Sometimes there's central coordination of HCP engagements at congresses when it comes to those home office led meetings. Sometimes it's a little bit decentralized, but either way, it's a really important fundamental step to get a 360 view of the footprint your company plans to have at the upcoming Congress. So one way you can utilize tagging to do this aggregation that Chris is talking about is to kind of create a tag for the initial nominations for meetings at a Congress. So you might create sort of a generic, Congress XYZ 2023 nominations tag, right? And you would share that with all of the members of your organization who are planning to either coordinate meetings with experts or execute them themselves. And what this does is it gives you an initial snapshot of what your company plans are. Now from there, a lot of times people will use sort of a tracking tool that they develop. Oftentimes a good old-fashioned spreadsheet comes in handy because there'll be other details as you move through the scheduling process that you'll want to sort of capture the details of. So maybe you've got sort of this list that you download from our platform right into an Excel spreadsheet, has all of the HCPs your company's planning on meeting with, along with their link to their H1 profile, a lot of other details. You can trim out what you don't need, you can keep what you do, but you're probably going to want to add in some fields that are going to be useful for planning. So you might want to have a column that's including all of the stakeholders from your organization that are going to be, planning to attend those meetings. And I think we're going to talk in a moment about objective setting, because that's probably the next most important step once you've got that view of who you'd like to meet with, is setting up those objectives. But you'll definitely want to have sort of as part of your tracker, if you keep something like that, and you might even keep your tracker in a digital format because your company's using an app for the Congress. But these fields will help you to kind of keep track of, what the meeting details are, who's going to be there, what the contact information is, any of those specific notes. But from there, we'll kind of get into the next step. So first and foremost, get a look-see of whoever from your organization the experts are that your company wants to meet with, right? So that's the first thing. Maybe you download that content into a list to kind of get you going on the planning piece of it. But let's take a next step at our next tip for great Congress planning.
Yeah, and this is a great follow-up, Chris. So within our own platform, once you've selected those HCPs that you're actually interested in finding out more information about, maybe you've shared them with your medical leadership. Maybe they don't have time necessarily to really understand everything that HCP is before they go into that meeting at the conference. One of the really interesting and awesome things that we can do with our platform is actually tell you in real time what the HCPs that you're interested are actually publishing. What are they particularly interested in? What clinical trial has recently had a readout that they may be on? And this is even before you get to what they might actually be talking about at the Congress. Because when you go into that room, you're going to want to be able to talk about the breadth of knowledge that this HCP, particularly the one that you're interested in, or interested in the knowledge to glean from them, what they can actually provide to you. And of course, that's going to give you a leg up on a lot of your competitors who might not necessarily know or have this particular feature in their platform, or if they don't have a platform, they might not know about all of their research interests that are coming out all the time. And, this is really great, Chris, to be able to point that out, to really show what our platform, the power that our platform has as a reason to come back in. And so when we talk about H1 being more than just a database, it really is an application that allows real-time tracking of HCPs to really understand the underlying need to why they are truly thought leaders in their fields. And with that, I'll pass that over to Chris as to how this can apply, even more granularity to how you plan out your engagements at a Congress.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so next pearl, right? Objective setting. I think that when it comes to really outstanding Congress planning, right? The best in class engagements that I have seen have really laddered those planned engagements up to strategic objectives. Now, we mentioned before, I could spend a whole hour talking about the value of a centrally coordinated effort when it comes to setting up engagements with physician scientists at a Congress, right? But whether depending on the way your company approaches it, you still want to make sure that you've got specific strategic objectives that are the foundation for your engagements with the HCPs. So whether you're you're planning on having senior executives from your organization attend or not, you still want to make sure you've got a plan for those meetings. And sometimes it can be a little bit daunting if you're an MSL that's out in the field, and especially if it's a very large organization that you work for, it can be a little bit daunting to think about the idea of reaching out to your chief medical officer, because sometimes they can sit very far away from those field-based roles. But I'm going to encourage you to be courageous and make that step. If not yourself, then sort of, again, centrally coordinate the sort of capture of those objectives with those senior executives, because what that will help you do as you start to research the background, as Chris has been talking about, using your platform to do so, and you're starting to kind of build out the plan for those meetings, it allows you to sort of establish what the talking points are going to be, which becomes important later when you think about sort of giving an overall picture to your team, right? So I apologize for the background noise there. But the bottom line is you want to make sure you've got some kind of alignment to what those strategic objectives are. And what that avoids is kind of this situation where you've got everybody sitting down for that meeting when it finally happens, and that kind of death nail question, what are we talking about? If we have those objectives already lined up, we can kick off very proactively the tone of that meeting to really kind of get to the business of that discussion. So you're going to use your platform to kind of fill in the blanks on what sessions that HCP is going to be involved in, what the body of work looks like from a research perspective, where their areas of interest are, perhaps even, the areas in which they're conducting or participating in clinical trials. You may have some experts that are more basic or translational science. And if they're involved in trials, they're maybe earlier in the pipeline, whereas you'll have other experts that you'll be able to explore and platform and understand that they're really kind of helping get products over the fence and into the market in later phase trials. But utilize your platform for that background, but then do your own legwork internally to make sure you've got tight objectives for those meetings. So I'll kind of kick it back to the team here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. And, leveraging what we have to be able to make some of those decisions a lot easier internally is a lot of what we try to do here as a strategic insights team, is to really give you that information so that when you get to that key decision point internally, it becomes an easy, you're able to easily aggregate what you already know and outline that for your particular team. And this particular nugget, or pearl, as we're calling them, is really exciting as well. So you can use H1 actually to be able to generate that background information so that when you get to the conference, so you're talking about 1 to 2 weeks before the Congress, you want to make sure that you have profiles made so that and those people who are going to be in the room with you know why you're talking to this HCP, what specifically is of interest when you can't be looking at your phone or your computer. So one of these really interesting things that we can do is we can actually create, and what we've done in our platform is created a template for you to be able to download this information and service it for you. And so one way that you can actually do this is to customize it yourself. A lot of what Chris has been talking about is what additional information can you share within your team to make sure that you have the right information. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to her. She has a lot of experience in this area, and I know she's going to be able to help us out.
Yeah, so if I kind of think about sort of kind of Congress 101, right, when it comes to profile development, there were a couple of things that I really sort of like when it comes to an approach on profile development. As Chris mentioned, you can customize these templates and, pop a headshot in there. You can pop in their bibliometric information, maybe some insights on their most recent publications that are going to be of interest. You can put in some hyperlinks there. And I always like to sort of take two approaches. Not every end user of a profile like this is going to be the same type. You're going to have some people that are digital readers, and for them, those hyperlinks that you embed in here can be really useful. I would have oftentimes executive leadership that would like to read through these end to end on a long plane ride to the Congress, right? If they were going to be the recipients of this kind of content. So what I'd like to do is sort of have those profiles built in a bit of a catalog, a book, if you will. You can put them into one document. If it's going to be distributed digitally, you can have that out several days before the Congress to your team. Anybody that's going to be participating in those meetings would be a good recipient for your briefing book, if you will. So you want to have a digital copy available for those HCPs that want it. It can be PDF'd and sent out in a nice email with sort of some details that you're responsible for coordinating. But you also may want to consider building this in such a way that it could be printed, right? And maybe having a few printed copies available that are bound and distributed at your pre-con meeting when you get on site for the Congress. You're going to have some readers that really like a hard copy, want to jot down notes, that kind of thing. So you can have two different versions of a briefing book that you've created from your downloaded profiles, and it really becomes a handy tool to keep you anchored, right? So when you get to these meetings, if you're the person who's point on sort of running the meeting, you've got the objectives that are in there, you've got a debrief on the expert ready to go, and we're all aligned as we walk into the meeting room, ready to have that conversation. So really critical to kind of keeping everybody on the same page about who we're meeting with and why we're connecting. And those are a couple of my favorite tips for distributing those different variations of a briefing book, but it's a great tool to have. And if you wanted to sort of even build it out, you could pop a few additional pages into a brief like this that gives the readers a snapshot of your own company's footprint at the Congress. If you guys are sponsoring a SIMPO or various banner ads or other types of Congress promotions, you could pop those in there. You could let the executive team or your attendees know of the different types of sessions or posters that your company is supporting the presentation of. All kinds of details like this. It can make a really nice handy brief that can be very cross-collaborative with other members of your organization. So maybe we can go to the next slide, Elizabeth, and kind of bring it home with our fifth tip, which is wrapping it all up. Really critical piece, right? So I think that there's always a risk of Congress engagements being a bit transactional, right? We can sometimes see these experts once or twice a year from an aggregate team member standpoint like this at a Congress. And they can either be part of a strategic engagement plan that you've sort of thought through, how you're going to engage this series of experts throughout time, or it can be sort of a moment in time. And I think that you end up having really happy HCPs when you've got a great set of strategic objectives, things your company wants to talk about, and with that HCP, and you've also got the reverse. You've also, ahead of these meetings, you've kind of aligned with that expert on the things they want to talk about. And then you're set up really well to have a conversation that results in action items. And one of my favorite tips for really making a Congress experience sing is to kind of follow that plan, right? And at the end, you've got all of these rich insights and action items that your team has brought from those experiences. I think the best engagements are the ones where you walk away with a plan, right? You and the KOL or the expert have an idea of the next thing you're going to either be talking about or you're going to be working on, right? So really crucial after you've had this series of engagements. It could be 5, it could be 125, depending on the size of the Congress. But once you're done, it's so important to pull everybody back together. First of all, you've nominated somebody in these meetings to be the scribe for the action items and the takeaways. And then that has to be pulled together, and then it has to sort of be discussed among your team. So after you've had this Congress engagement, and I personally would put the calendar invite several weeks on before you even need it on there, right? Because you know how calendars get so busy and they get filled up. You want to make sure you've got a spot on the calendar to have that debrief after the Congress, and ideally a few days after, pull everybody together and kind of go through the engagements you've had and said, okay, we met with Dr. Jones and here are the things that really were critical that we wanted to talk about. Here's what came out of the meeting, and here are the things that we have to action on. And that's the point at which you do some delegation, right? You make sure that there is somebody responsible for following through and executing on those action items. And that is what will really make these Congress engagements part of a strategic plan, as opposed to these moments. So Chris, if you want to add anything, I'll kick it over to you and see what you have to add.
Absolutely. And so Chris, these great pearls here. I'm always learning from you. So this has been really exciting, not only for, I'm sure, our participants, but for me as well. So one of the things that I want to kind of bring us home in here and to ask you actually is, leveraging the H1 platform for that follow-up, making sure that we're interacting with those HCPs, making sure we're tracking what they are doing post-Congress, because as we know, these HCPs aren't just one and done. They're continuous research, continuous improvement for themselves. And then also the research, what is the best way could you see leveraging our platform really to make sure that we're able to track what they are doing, beyond just the Congress when we had our interaction with them?
Right. And I guess, it's interesting because we often talk to MSL teams who are interested in understanding the medical impact of their field-based medicine teams, right? There's a lot of emphasis right now going, how do we measure that? How do we pull some metrics in around that? And one thing I might recommend that you do to leverage your platform, your H1 platform, is post-Congress, as part of that set of action items, create an additional tag, right? Create a tag for all of the people that you actually met with. We started off our conversation today with the idea of building a tag for the people you want to nominate, but build a tag for those people that you completed executions with or executed meetings with. So you have a historical record that you can use for future Congresses, but you can also start to track over time different behaviors, right? And you can sort of keep track of those people in aggregate. So if you had sort of a talk track that you were particularly interested in as an objective for these meetings, maybe you had, with each of those experts, you wanted to talk about this particular educational initiative. It would be interesting over time, as you've got those people aggregated as a group, to see if there's any influence on their body of work, if they start to kind of publish or sort of get involved in even social engagement that is talking about that particular topic that you surfaced in your meetings. But I would definitely create that post-Congress tag so you have that historical record. It also helps you for your future planning as you're thinking about, say if we got ASCO coming up, right? You're going to meet with all these people at ASCO, and that's coming up at the end of May. And after you've met with them, you're going to start planning immediately for ESMO, right? It would be really interesting, as we think about that continuum of engagements with those experts. If you met with Dr. Jones at ASCO and Dr. Jones is going to be at ESMO, it might be a really great forward planning tactic to have that understanding of who is met with and what you plan to talk about with them next. Elizabeth, anything else? How are we doing on time? You're going to keep us honest here.
Yeah, we're getting close. Those are some great pearls and nuggets. Thank you both. And that's an interesting point about following the continuum of the experts throughout the year. And that's the great thing about the H1 platform, is you have the ability to do that, to kind of track them in all the places that they're going. We do have is there anything else you either want to add before we go to questions?
Gosh, I could talk about Congress planning all day long, but I mean, I will say this, that if you are a team that's on the line here that has H1 as a tool, and you would like to talk about some strategizing, if you will, around how to sort of employ that concept of central coordination, that's something that the strategy and insights team can really work on to, as a consulting opportunity. And that's included in your H1 package. If you have solutions, you have strategy and insights as part of that. We would love to help your team with really sort of developing that capability and that function. And just remember us as your strategic bionic arm. When you're thinking about anything that your organization needs to do as it relates to strategic expert engagement, we're your peeps. And we really get excited and we nerd out over this topic a lot. And so if you can think of things you need help with, even building out strategic engagement plans, that kind of thing, we're your thought partners for that. And we really get excited about it. So thanks, Elizabeth.
Sure. Chris, Riley, any closing thoughts?
So I think Chris did a very good job of wrapping up not only what we do here at H1 and how you can leverage our platform in order to strategically engage our expertise, our experts of interest, but also how you can use us for Congress planning as we have that going forward. again, I'm not going to add anything there, just to say that we're excited to work with everybody here. Excited, hopefully, to see your smiling faces using our platform, reaching out to us in the near future, making sure that we're helping you the best and most strategic way we can.
Well, thank you to Chris and Chris for your amazing expertise and deep knowledge of Congress planning and the H1 platform. If you are not currently an H1 customer and you're interested in becoming one, my email address is here. I can connect you with the right people, or you can visit our website at www.h1.co. And if you go to the resources page, we have our full conference planning guide there, or I would be happy to connect you with Chris and Chris if you would like. So thank you for joining us on this edition of One-on-One with H1, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Happy conference planning.
Thanks, everybody.